So you got a podcast episode to record and you got to give a call to action. But suddenly you're like, what do I even say? Because there's so much that you could say. Follow me on Instagram or LinkedIn, download this freebie, book a call, review the show, join my list. And just like that, you're in your head going, oh my gosh, how do I say all of this without sounding salesy, or worse, without pushing listeners away? And if you've ever thought this, turns out you're not the only one. Because in today's episode, I am answering a listener question about what you need to give a podcast call to action that actually converts without sounding desperate or like a slimy car salesman. Because giving a call to action might seem like what to say and how to say it, but it actually goes much deeper. And until you understand this, it's going to be hard to choose a call to action, much less share it in a way that actually feels good. So in this episode, we're going to dig into why this happens and what it's costing you, so you can stop second guessing yourself and start turning your podcast into something that doesn't just connect with your audience, but actually moves them to take action. Welcome to Insider Secrets to a Top 100 podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Elmer. Let's make your business binge-worthy.
Hi, Courtney. This is Chrissy Bold from the podcast Mom's Guide to Finding Herself. I have a question for you. I just love my audience, and I want to connect with them in all the ways. I want to be friends on Instagram, keep in touch with my email newsletter, show them where to find my freebies, how they can book a discovery call, and of course, I want them to subscribe to the podcast and leave a rating review. But after all of that, I feel like I'm ending a really great first date, but I'm coming off like an overly eager stage 5 clinger. Please help me to invite my listeners into my world without scaring them away.
First of all, Chrissy, I just want to acknowledge how real and how common this issue actually is, because there are so many things that we could potentially share. And when it comes down to actually sharing something, I think we can easily box ourselves into this all or nothing thinking of either I need to share everything because I don't want to miss out on anything. I don't want my listener to miss out on anything. Or I need to share one thing, but which thing do I share? What's the best thing to share? And how do I choose that? And it can feel like a lot of pressure. So here's the thing out the gate that I want all of you to remember is that calls to action will always feel gross and icky when you don't fully believe what you're offering is valuable. And there's a lot of reasons that this shows up. On the surface, it might look like, well, I don't want to sound salesy, or I don't want to sound desperate, or I don't want to push people away. My podcast is about building trust. I don't want to undermine that. And that's totally valid. At the same time, you might also be inwardly feeling, well, I need conversions for this podcast to be worth my time. That means I need to get people on my email list. I got to book calls. And of course, follow the podcast, leave me a review because I need social proof, and so on and so forth. So what I want you to do first and foremost, and this is true for every aspect of your life, your relationships, your business, your work, your podcast, pay attention to should and need language. Anytime this language shows up, it is a signal that something deeper is going on that's preventing you from taking a particular action, and it's keeping you from getting the result you want. Why though? Why does this happen? Why would we prevent ourselves or self-sabotage to keep from getting a result that we want? That makes no sense logically. But it's because this inner resistance creates a secondary payoff, which is often a more powerful driver of behavior than the result that you want. I know it's a little bit mind-bendy. So let's break this down, because what is happening here is that by saying, well, I'm not going to give a call to action because I don't want my listeners to feel like I'm just pushing stuff on them, might kind of feel like you're protecting your listeners or you're protecting the container of your podcast, but really it's self-protection. It's self-sabotage in disguise. And I promise I'm going to give you an example here in just a second, because this has been so true for me, oh my gosh, throughout my entire business journey, throughout my entire podcasting journey. What essentially happens here is in our minds, we create this catch-22 and a self-fulfilling prophecy. Prophecy is, well, I need conversions, but I'm afraid that asking for them is going to push people away. So therefore, I don't ask, or I'm not consistent in asking. And so when that happens, you lose what you need, which is conversions. And so this reinforces the belief that when you give a call to action, it doesn't work, which makes you less likely to try again, which only perpetuates the conversion issue. The catch-22 is that the fear of being seen as pushy or salesy might harm your reputation, which is something that you value more than making the sale. And right there is the secondary payoff. Because if you don't give a call to action, or if you just throw 5 things out there hoping one lands but nothing converts, you get to protect your reputation. That becomes the hidden reward. You get to say, well, at least I didn't push my listeners away and lose their trust. And that becomes the internal, unconscious trade-off. It lowers the perceived risk of harming your reputation, which keeps your image safe, but it keeps your podcast stuck. Or in other words, you're protecting your image at the expense of your impact. And I'm not saying you, Chrissy, but you as in all of us, because this comes up a lot and it has been so true in my journey. Ask my neuro coach. She will tell you, like, Courtney, first of all, you're telling yourself you should do this and you need to do that and you don't need to do this and you don't need to do anything. Who told you you need to do any of this stuff to begin with? And then she catches me whenever I'm saying, here's what I'm doing to, what is at the root of that? Protect my reputation. And then she always calls out like, no, it's actually harming your reputation. And if you have a background in neurocoaching, NLP, sleight of mouth patterns, or anything like that, then all of this is going to be very, very clear to you. You've probably heard it before. That secondary payoff is so real. It's unconscious, but it's real. Now, if you're not trained in NLP, or if you're like, oh my gosh, all that stuff is just a load of crock, like it's super woo-woo, I don't know. Notice the patterns in your life. Where are you creating those self-fulfilling prophecies and those catch-22s? Because we all do it. This is how the human brain works. So no matter what you believe, this is how our human brains are wired. Because we are wired to take the path of least resistance and also to seek out and protect what is most important to us. So if your reputation is most important to you, let's just say for the sake of an example here, then the unconscious benefit of protecting that reputation at all costs is going to drive the conscious actions that you take. And we see this showing up in this particular example, like giving a call to action on your podcast. And so certainly if you and I were sitting down and having a one-on-one conversation, we could get into the nuance of how this exact belief shows up for you. And I could help you pinpoint exactly what's causing it to show up so you could gain that awareness, reframe it into something more helpful so that giving a call to action on your podcast would never be an issue for you again. And believe it or not, that is some of the most powerful and the most transformative work that we do inside of Pod Launch. It's not just about having the strategy, but it's also about removing any of the roadblocks, perceived or otherwise, that are keeping you from getting the results you want with your podcast. And after working with hundreds of podcasters through the years, what I've seen time and time again is that any kind of hesitation around giving a call to action is rooted in a deeper fear, not of asking, but of being rejected when you ask. Ask me how I know. The fear of rejection or abandonment. The fear of losing respect or credibility. The fear of being seen as disingenuous. Here, I'm going to give you all this amazing value, and now I want you to buy my thing. And that can feel really problematic when your whole podcast and your whole brand is based on being helpful and building trust. And if this is happening for you right now, then you will hesitate every time you ask someone to book a call or grab your freebie or click the link in the show notes or write a review on your podcast. Because if you're not sold on what you're offering, your audience is going to feel that energy unconsciously, and therefore they won't be sold on it either. So before we can look at call to action formulas and where to put it in your episode and what to offer in your call to action, which we're going to dive into here in just a second, we have to address this deeper problem, because without this knowledge, without this awareness, I can give you all the call to action formulas in the world and they'll never work for you because you won't feel 100% confident and comfortable in offering them. And if you don't feel that alignment internally, your audience is going to sense that disconnect externally. Because it's an inner confidence that gives your call to action its power to convert, not the words themselves, not the framework that you're using. And that kind of confidence comes from clarity on why you're making the offer and believing so fully, so deeply in the reason that you're making it. Because when you believe that inviting someone to take the next step with you might come across as self-serving or salesy, what you're really saying is, well, I'd rather keep my listeners comfortable than help them grow, which is a contradiction when you're in the business of transformation. But what's really happening there is that the secondary payoff of protecting your reputation and protecting the relationship with your listeners is causing you or driving the behavior of not offering a call to action at all, or being confused on what to offer, or throwing a bunch of things out there to see what sticks, but then be like, oh, nothing is converting, therefore I'm not going to offer anything at all, therefore call to actions don't work. Because the secondary payoff of not offering that call to action is that unconsciously you get to protect your reputation, which protects your identity. Only it's not your true identity. It's the version of you that's afraid to be misunderstood. And the reality is, you can't control how anyone else feels. You can only control how you choose to show up. And this is a really hard place, believe me. This is such a hard place to grow to, but it's very liberating when you do. So if you've ever hesitated to ask for the review or share your freebie or invite someone into a deeper transformation, come join me for this workshop. Come buy my program. I want you to know this right here, giving a call to action, this is not about getting over your fear. It's not about just like, saying, okay, buckling up your bootstraps. Is that a phrase people use anymore? Probably not. Anyway, we're going to go with it. Buckling up your bootstraps and saying, okay, here we go. I'm just going to give the call to action and I'm just going to make it happen and I'm just going to fake it till I make it. No. We're not going to do that. What we got to do in order to get really comfortable with giving that call to action so you can feel good about it, because that's going to transfer through your voice, is about first clarifying your intention for that call to action to begin with. Because if you're someone who values connection and trust, then great news. You can learn how to give a call to action in every episode that checks all the boxes. It gets you conversions and it feels good saying it. Because if the intention behind your call to action is to serve your listener, guess what? It's not going to push people away. It's actually going to pull the right people closer. So the first step to doing this is to clarify. When it comes to picking a call to action for your episode, what is it that you actually want your listeners to do? Your call to action needs to feel like the natural next step. And I also want to make a really important note here that your call to action is different from your call to engage. Inside of Pod Launch, we actually teach you how to make your episodes bingeable, not through what you say or through what you teach in the episode, but rather how you say it and the way that you structure the episode to keep people listening. So we're not going to dive into that structure here. I give you a high-level look in another episode, and I'll link to that in the show notes. But there are two very distinct pieces of this episode structure that will help you optimize for two things. Number one is connection, and number two is conversion. So I call these your CTE and your CTA. Your CTE, that call to engage, is built to optimize for connection with your listeners. This is the leave a review if you found something really valuable inside this episode. You hear me ask that on this show all the time. And many of you take me up on that, which, by the way, thank you for that because it means a lot. I read every single review that comes through, and it's amazing sometimes where it's like, sometimes it's this deep stuff where it's like, oh my gosh, this is life-changing and transformative, and it's changed my podcast for the better, and I decided not to give up anymore because of this podcast right here, which is always awesome to hear, of course. But then other times it's just very specific where it was like, this episode gave me exactly what I needed and the information that I haven't been able to find anywhere else. Thank you for that. And so whenever I ask for a review here on the podcast, I'm asking with the intention of, please share if you found this valuable. If you didn't, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal if you don't want to leave a review on the podcast. Or if you haven't found value in it, well then, of course, I'm not expecting you to leave a review. I'm not here to twist anyone's arm. But if you did find it valuable, I would love it if you leave a review because that's going to help other potential listeners know that this show is going to be worth their time too, and that they'll find value here too. And so that's my intention behind it. My intention is really just to create one small little open channel of communication between me and you listening to the show every episode. Or a call to action could look like, well, find me on LinkedIn, connect with me there. DM me your biggest takeaway from this episode. I'd love to hear about it. Or if you want me to cover a question on the podcast, that you just have this burning question that I haven't answered yet here on the show, DM it to me so that I know, so that I can create an episode around it for you. Or it could sound like, share this to your Instagram stories and tag me when you do, because this is going to help us get this podcast or get this episode in the hands of more people who need it. Or share it with a friend, text it to a friend with a personal message, letting them know how much you love the podcast and why you think your friend should listen to. However you like to engage, pick one of these and rotate between them in your episodes. This way you can have a few different calls to engage, which makes it feel really clear, really focused, never stale episode to episode, and rotate between them. And that's what I recommend for calls to engage. And these calls to engage, these CTEs, are really built to optimize for connection. This is different though from your call to action. Those are your CTAs. Those are optimized for conversions. And I want to clear something up right now. You do not have to have a specific call to action for every individual episode. For example, if I were to create some sort of framework for giving a podcast call to action, like a cheat sheet, and I would say, okay, now go get this cheat sheet in the show notes. I'm sure you would go click it because that would be a super valuable resource. But instead, I'm not going to create the resource. I'm just going to give you the content here inside of the episode. Because what happens is, and ask me how I know this too, I used to create individual call to action resources like for every single episode. And I get this question from listeners and from clients all the time. Like, should I be creating like specific freebies for that episode? No, this is going to create so much extra work for you, so much logistical nightmare stuff on the back end, headache, because it's not just about creating the deliverable, it's about setting up the individual landing page and the thank you page and the tracking links and tracking conversions and then weeding through the data to see how all that converts. And that's just a lot of work. Like, hold on, let me get my crystal ball out, that I see you not having the time or the desire to do. So instead, what I recommend is having 2 entry points from your podcast onto your email list. Your email list is where you want to drive people. Because from your email list, then you can nurture them. Then you can add more value. Then you can sell other stuff. You can make other offers and you don't have to blast it all across your podcast. So 2 entry points and you can rotate between them, but they must be a natural next step. And you've heard me mention my 2 here before. Come join our live workshop, taking everything that you learn here on the podcast to the next step of building the foundation for a binge-worthy top show. Or book a call with my team and get a demo of Pod Launch. If you're someone who is struggling to grow your podcast, or you're stuck in less than 200 download per episode jail, or you're wanting to launch a podcast, but you don't want to launch a podcast and spend all your time creating something that nobody really wants to listen to. And you can take either of those actions. And when you do, you'll automatically get on our email list, where if you're not ready to enroll in Pod Launch, or if you're just looking for more guidance and insight beyond what we cover here on the show, you can hang out with me there. You can be in our world. And so the links for both of those live in our episode footer, which if you're hosting with Buzzsprout, you have access to this feature. If you're hosting with a different hosting provider, check for access to this feature. It's incredible. I absolutely love it. I'm low-key obsessed with it because it acts like an email signature. And you can hyperlink things in that episode footer that you refer to frequently on the podcast. So I can always refer to, hey, if I'm in the middle of an episode and it makes total sense right then and there to say, you know what, by the way, if you're loving what you're learning right now, come join me for the workshop because we're going to dive deeper into this. The link's in the show notes. Or book a call right now if you're someone who's struggling, blah, blah, blah. And so I can just refer to it in the show notes. It's always there. And I never have to remember, and my team never has to remember to actually add the link to the show notes. And so what I recommend for your call to action, again, it must be a natural next step. It's ideally something that takes what they're learning on the podcast to the next level, to the next natural progression. Maybe there's a stepping stone. You can envision this, and I often like to think of it as stepping stones across a river. If your goal right now is converting listeners to leads and eventually clients for your podcast, the first stepping stone is getting them to listen to your podcast. So they're standing on that first stepping stone. They're listening to the show, but they can't make the big leap across the river just yet in order to work with you. There might be a couple of other stepping stones they have to go through in order to get there, in order to be ready to hit that enroll button and say, yeah, I want your help to guide me through whatever the transformation is that you offer. So what are those stepping stones? And those become your natural next steps, your calls to action that you can then rotate between. We do have a third call to action that we've put here on the podcast specific to an episode segment that we recently introduced. You've probably heard the Fix My Pod segments here on the show. And that call to action is specific in that if you want me to look at your podcast and literally have my eyes and ears and expertise on your show, then book one of those times to come and get the chance to get your show featured here on my show so that we can dig into your podcast and I can give you next steps and actionable steps to take related to whatever the challenges that you're experiencing with your podcast. So maybe in some instances you have something that is referential to that episode, but not like a specific freebie. So I did want to clarify that in case those of you were like, wait a minute, Courtney, you do have a specific call to action for some specific episodes on your show. And it really is just those Fix My Pod episodes, because the natural next step is if you're listening to that episode and you're like, holy cow, I want Courtney's eyes and ears on my podcast. Well, then naturally you would want to take that next step, right? So, and if you don't, then you won't click that link and it's no big deal. So the point here being that you want those next call to actions to lead to something else that automatically gets someone on your email list. And these should add real value in being an extension or a continuation of what you offer on your show so that it makes sense for someone to go, oh yeah, I want that, but not so specific that it only works for one episode. Like some sort of PDF you created for episode 72 because you thought that if you had a PDF for each episode that it would convert better. It won't. I promise you. So ask yourself, if the goal is to get people on my email list and it needs to be a natural next step, what do I already have and offer? Or what could I easily create and offer to lead people to the next step? So that's the natural progression of things. First, get to the root of what it is that not giving a call to action or remaining in confusion about what call to action to give is protecting you from. Because when you have clarity on that, and when you can get really clear on your intention behind the call to action that you give on your show, then you're going to be able to give that call to action and it's going to feel good to give. Now, the next step from there is to recognize that there's a difference between a call to engage and a call to action. We encourage all of our clients to do one of each in every episode. And this is not some long, drawn-out 2-minute thing that you're doing for each of those, right? This is quick. And if you love this episode, I would love it if you would take 30 seconds, scroll down, tap the 5 stars on Apple or on Spotify, and bonus points when you write a written review on Apple, letting other people know that this show is going to be worth their time too. And by the way, if you're listening to this and you want my eyes and ears on your podcast, then click the link in the show notes and get on the wait list so that the next time we open up coaching spots here on the show, you have a chance to grab one of those and get my eyes and ears on your podcast. And in the next episode, and we move on. This is not something that you're going to be like long, drawn out, meandering. I mean, my calls to action on my old episodes, oh my gosh, you're going to laugh at this. They were literally like probably 5 minutes long. Like I lost everybody by like word 2 because it was like so long and so drawn out. And here I'm trying to convince people why they need to do the thing I'm asking them to do. No, when you have clarity on that intention, it's going to be so easy and quick, so natural for you to say. I mean, it's going to just like flow off of your tongue. You're going to be so surprised. But you got to get rid of what is driving the inaction first. Okay, that's really, really important. That's why we open this episode with that. I will give you one quick caveat here regarding calls to action. Because if you have a sponsor on your podcast, then you obviously have to promote their stuff too. So what do you do then? Do you promote just the sponsor stuff and not your own stuff? Do you rotate? How do you make sure you deliver for your sponsor while not cannibalizing your own offers? I'm going to break it down. I'm going to make it super simple. I want you to think of the calls to action, again, separate from your call to engage. Your calls to actions are ad spots. Think of it like TV commercials. In a 30-minute show, there are 8 minutes of ads and only 22 minutes of content. My episodes are 20 minutes. So technically, I have 2 ad spots here on the show if we're looking at it from a traditional ad to content ratio. This helps you give your sponsors airtime and your own stuff airtime too without overwhelming or alienating your audience. So one of those ad spots could be for your sponsor. Bonus points if you put it first, right? That's going to be higher value for the sponsor, but that could be something you work in their deal. Like if they buy a high enough package, well, then they get the first ad spot or whatever. And then your stuff can go in the second ad spot. So it sounds something like this. At the start of the episode, the sponsor could get the host read ad, and not at the beginning of the episode. I cannot stand podcast episodes, and I'm guessing that you can't either, that open with a litany of ads, and you're like, when are we actually going to get to the content? When I was judging for the Webby Awards, I cannot tell you how many times that a podcast episode would hit my judging block, and that I would listen to literally 2+ minutes of ads before I ever heard the host's voice. Instant turn off. Do not do that. But you could do it at the beginning of the show, i.e. in that first ad spot. And by the way, I got to thank XYZ sponsor because today's show wouldn't be possible without them. And because you're a loyal listener, you're going to get whatever the deal a sponsor is giving you. And then later in the episode, I would give my own call to action. The key thing here to remember is that your sponsor's offer needs to complement and not compete with whatever it is you offer. You want to make sure it's aligned for your listener. Otherwise, it creates confusion and neither will convert. Each of them needs to be distinct. So for example, my friends over at Podmatch, I could easily promote the Podmatch platform here on the show and then also promote Podlaunch here on the show because they're 2 different and distinct things. However, I'd never say yes to a sponsor who has a competing offer to mine because it just wouldn't make sense for you listening to the show. So here's your homework. Walking away from this episode, what's the natural next step that you want your listener to take? What would be a natural continuation or advancement of what they're learning on your podcast? And make a list of calls to engage that you can pick one and rotate between. And then you give your quick call to engage and then your call to action. That's a natural next step for that listener to take. And then you do it with clarity of intention. Because if you've ever felt that giving a call to action makes you sound desperate or salesy, it's not because you're doing it wrong. It's not because you don't have the right words to say. It's because you haven't gotten fully clear on why you're offering it or on what you're inviting people into. So you can literally follow word for word the calls to actions that I've just given you here on the show as examples if you wanted a starting framework to jump off of. But the reason I'm not giving a specific word for word framework here in this episode is because it's not about the words you say. It's about the intention behind it. So those are your marching orders. Get to the root of your hesitation. Get clear on where you're leading your listener, and then give that call to action with your whole heart, literally like you're telling your best friend or your favorite client and not apologizing for it. But wait a minute, Courtney, this brings up more questions. Like, first of all, where should I be putting my call to action in my episode to get the best results? How do I know if people are clicking it? What makes a good conversion percentage? Like, what's good in terms of conversions? How soon should I expect it to work? How do I know if it's working at all? Come on, you know I've got you, right? In the next episode, I'm going to walk you through exactly how to deliver your call to action, where it belongs in your episode, how to make it feel like part of your episode and not like this weird, awkward ad just kind of like hawked in the middle there, and most importantly, how to know if it's actually working and what to tweak if it's not. So if you've been winging it with your calls to actions, or if you have no idea what's converting and no idea where to start to even tell if something's converting, stay right where you are because all of that is coming up next to help you make your business binge-worthy.